Good morning. I was going to ask Mr. Weldon to do the prayer, but have y'all seen him this session?
He's on 75 right now.
He's always on 75. He's in a ditch somewhere. Y'all bow with me. Gracious Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for the blessings of the day. Thank you for the lives we lead. Thank you for our families. Keep us under your wings. Let us do things that are pleasing to you. Let us do things that are good for the people of the state of Georgia. Give us enough sense to know what those things are. Lead us and guide us. Thank you for the week. Keep us in your arms. In my Savior's name I pray. Amen. See, y'all do this to me all the time, make me late. And I'm just sitting here waiting for you to get here, and you wander in. There's Earl, there's golf going on downstairs. There's balls and things. If you wonder where I was. Mr. Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here on behalf of Representative Nimmer to ask for a couple of bills. He is caught up in traffic this morning. The first is House Bill 315, which is under modified open rule, which is the name change for the TCSG. That would be a phase-in name change. The expenses are already in the agency budget to cover that cost. The other one he asked me to ask for, which I did not see on the sheet, Mr. Chairman, is House Bill 319, which is ratifying the executive order suspending the gas tax collection.
Mr. Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
One more time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's that thing in your ear that makes you do that.
It'll get full after a while and drop off. On House Bill 315, didn't we just do a name change a couple of years ago?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry.
I was thinking that we did 5.5 years ago.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Hey, Christian, that 319 is probably on the yellow sheet. It'll be tomorrow.
Okay.
No, it's not on the yellow sheet. It hadn't made it out of the committee person hadn't brought it to us.
We'll check on that. Thanks, sir.
Mr. Caldwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's my very great honor to be back before you again asking for House Bill 252. If you'll follow down the 3 hole punches on the left side, it's the third one down right next to it under modified open rule. This is the J. Calvin Hill Jr. Act. It is a modest 23-page repeal bill that the House passed unanimously out of our chamber last year, sent it over to the Senate, got caught up in rules. We want to give this one another shot. Representative Welch carried it last year. The Code Revision Chairman asked if I would carry it for us this year. We have gotten it this far, and I'd ask your opportunity to take it down to the floor. I'd be happy to answer any questions and ask for your favorable consideration.
Any questions? No questions, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Grab.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. This morning, if you will look at the bottom of the page, modified structured rule, House Bill 169 is on the back page at the very top. This bill simply allows the tax commissioners in the 13 counties that require emissions to provide a temporary operating tag, much like a dealer would for a new purchase, for those vehicles who have failed emissions and need to drive the 150 or 200 prescribed miles. This temporary operating tag would exempt them from getting a ticket during that process while they're trying to get their emissions taken care of. It is at no cost to the state because these temporary operating tags are already available and these counties have access to them.
Any questions? We got a couple of questions. Hold on. Ms. Jones.
Thank you. I just had a clarifying question. Is
Yes.
the temporary operating tag provided by the emissions business, or who provides that?
The tax commissioner would actually issue the temporary operating tag.
So you fail the emissions, and then you have to go to your tag office to get the temporary.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And all applicable fees, taxes, liability insurance, all of that has to be, it's a prerequisite. That has to be taken care of in full.
Okay.
This would just be a 30-day opportunity for them to go and take care of the emissions.
Mr. Williams. No more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wait, Mr. Knight.
Just clarify a little bit for those of us who are not fully understanding this part of the code, but if it's already available, then help me understand what is the purpose of the bill.
Well, this is all the temporary tag issued on a failed emissions is not already available. These temporary tags are already created by the state when an individual purchases a new vehicle or has a new purchase and they're having problems getting the title transferred or whatnot. The dealer can issue a temporary operating tag for 30 days while they're getting that situation worked out. This would simply allow the tax commissioners to issue that same temporary tag while the consumer is working out their emissions, having to drive to recalibrate the car and take it back to get to the emissions taken care of. So the temporary operating tags are already on hand. We already have a stockpile of those. The tax commissioner would just issue it with the understanding that it's a temporary tag for 30 days. This is only to get your emissions taken care of.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. I have House Bill 201. It's in the modified structure rule on page 2. There is a program that the Public Service Commission administers that through a contract with a nonprofit private organization, money can be provided to that organization to buy equipment for people who are deaf or have hearing impairments. It's been in existence for about 25 or 30 years. This bill just allows the PSC in administering that program and in the contract they have with that organization to provide money for cellular or wireless equipment in addition to the landline equipment. And it also provides that they can, in that contract, the people that qualify for that, they can be up to 300% of the poverty level as opposed to 200%. But it purely allows the PSC to make those decisions.
Any questions of Mr. Parsons? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I ask your favorable consideration of House Bill 367. It's on the second page at the end of the modified structure rule. This is the bill brought on behalf of the judges of the Western Judicial Circuit for the creation of a fourth judgeship in accordance with the recommendations of the Judicial Council of Georgia for 2014. And so the basis of the ask is the analysis of circuit caseload that the Judicial Council does, and in committee the start date of the appointment was changed to match the appropriations that came through the appropriations process for an April 1st start date. So that's the basis of the substitute, as well as the chief judge selection was tweaked to match what the judges actually do and will do going forward. Be happy to answer any questions that there might be about it.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lumsden.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Page 1, under modified open rule, House Bill 338, which is the third from the bottom of that section. This is a bill that I presented to you last week. This bill passed out of the House last year, made it to the Senate, and was set aside in the rules because of its connection with the Technology Study Committee, which was done over this past summer. They have completed that study and have indicated that they would consider this bill. So this, as I said, was passed out of the House last year. In regard to it, it's a bill which simply sets up a local option for a local option funding mechanism for electronic citation systems. I'll be, in relation to our conversation, Mr. Chairman, I'm amenable to the change on the sunset, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Representative Lumsden, the goal of this is to cover the costs of developing this, the system, the initial cost of the system, right? How did you come up, or how did the people that developed this bill come up with the 8 years? The
reality is that for many of the departments across our and counties across our state, we have mid-sized and smaller departments, unlike our larger communities that may have the ability to move forward with this on their own. But the initial cost is where the challenge lies for most of these smaller agencies, and sometimes it may take collections of two years before they'll have enough to actually go forward with the process. So, and having been a county commissioner, sometimes when we pass something new, it takes a while for the idea to get spread through the community. So it very easily could be 3 years before they ever begin the process, and just wanted to ensure that they had ample time to get the program implemented and maintained for a period of time so they could absorb it into their budgets.
I just wouldn't want to see it become a profit center. I want to see the system get developed. Would you give some consideration to a lesser time than that 8 years?
Yes, as I said, I'm amenable to the 5-year provision that is standard, but the longer period was as for the reason that I pointed out.
Okay, thank you.
It would probably be worth your while to come up with an amendment. Is this thing's modified open, so it can go on the floor, an amendment to 5, and amend your bill to the 5 years, and it has to sit on your desk a little while, so it'd be a good idea to get that started.
All right, thank you.
No more questions.
Thank you, appreciate your consideration.
Rocky Raccoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's amazing how we've acquired names already this year with one little bill.
I got other names for you if you really want.
I bring again to you HB 299. It's a modified structure rule on the back page. This is basically where some merchants are already permitted to charge this fee. Under GILA Act, they are not permitted to charge the fee due to regulations presented on them. And this is a convenience fee is basically all it does. And any questions, be glad to answer.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members committee. On the back page on the modified structure, HB 348, agency bill codifying code the move of the Governor's Office of Workforce Development over to the Georgia Department of Economic Development. The governor wishes to have the Workforce Development Agency really in a more appropriate department. It just makes code aligned with federal regulations, no budgetary impact, and really no change in how the agency works, no changes in the 19 local workforce investment areas. This bill is just really building on the good work Chairman Hamilton did a few years ago. So just moving the Workforce Development Agency.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, page 2, under structured rule, HB 20. This is almost identical to, is identical to HB 683 from last year, which passed the floor with 160 plus votes and got held up in the Senate. What this bill would basically do would allow Georgia entities to allocate Georgia low-income housing tax credits regardless of federal income tax treatment. It basically said that Georgia law shall prevail in regard to determining whether or not these partnerships are valid, not federal law. It doesn't change the original intent or substance of the statute, so there's really no fiscal impact, and we've got a fiscal note to say as much.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I come before you once again to request HB 115 under modified open rule on page 1. It would simply allow some consumers to avoid foreclosure.
No questions. Thank you. Sonny boy, get on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under modified open, HB 304, it's about number 9 down on the first page. This is a clarification of current law. If you remember last time, this deals with how sentencers are being interpreted under a certain section where probation has to be a part of a sentence. The way courts were interpreting was that if you had a 19 or 20-year sentence, they were putting 1 year probation at the end, and if you had 2 sentences running one after the other, they were actually interpreting as having to let someone out of jail for a year to put them on probation, then rearrest them. And this just clarifies that to say, no, the probation time comes the end of whatever sentences that run consecutive with each other.
Questions, Mr. Hightower? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to, on the second page, under modified structure, House Bill 194, and then on the first page, I have a new bill on there today under modified open, House Bill 412. This is the Workers' Comp Advisory Council recommendation, been approved by the Workers' Comp Board. It basically deals with some exclusive remedy fixes based on a lawsuit, does away with some code section, raises the rate of workers' comp maximum, and extends the subsequent injury trust fund by 3 years because of an actuarial study that was done, as well as changes the formula on how that annual thing is done. It's passed out of our committee unanimously.
Questions of Mr. Hamilton, either bill. Ms. Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Hamilton, I have 2 questions. On line 24, is this a new provision where we eliminate the ability to seek any other civil liabilities, or is this existing law?
Currently what happened, there was a lawsuit, Pitts versus the City of Atlanta, where a court ruled that based on a contractual agreement that they went outside of exclusive remedy. And so what we're doing here is we're putting kind of belts and suspenders, if you will, on the fact that we do have exclusive remedy, but we're also then saying that nothing keeps the employer from contracting away exclusive remedy should they so choose to do that. So we're leaving the current case as it stands. In fact, the plaintiff attorney that once successfully litigated and won that suit is not opposed to this language either. So it's gone through the entire process. It's very, very complicated. There was 18 separate drafts of this legislation before they added those 4 words.
Okay. And then my second question is on line 213 on page 7. What is the genesis of shifting the custody of the records to the insurance department from the Board of Workers' Compensation?
What was determined was that there might be a potential conflict of interest if they kind of policed it. So once the subsequent injury trust fund is completed, rather than leave it housed there, they're simply going to put it over to the Department of Insurance so that there's no conflict of interest with the board.
Thank you.
Ms. Cooper?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like, on the back page, about halfway down, I'd like to ask for House Bill 195. That's the biosimilars bill. And at the proper time, I would like to ask that a bill be recommitted to Health and Human Services because of a drafting error.
Which bill is?
House Bill 436, the substitute to House Bill 436.
$436?
Yes, sir.
Okay, House Bill 436, we want it to go back to committee?
Yes, sir.
You make that move?
I move, sir. Sorry.
Any opposition? It's back.
Thank you.
Mr. A. Powell. Why is that?
Aye. Bring to you House Bill 147. Very simple bill. It allows for a 2-year tag purchase. Right now, you're limited to 1 year. This revenue neutral, where it's $20 a year. This would say a 2-year tag. If you want to buy one, it'd be $40 for the 2 years. Matter of convenience, also for the business community. We have certain businesses out there that would like to register their vehicles for 2 years at a time, and just a very, very good bill.
Any questions? Thank you. Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to, again, ask for House Bill 183, the Home Care Patient Protection Act. And I had gotten with Chairman Rice, and we did contact a constituent on Thursday, I believe that was. So I'd asked that we move that bill to the floor.
Any questions? Mr. Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to ask for HB 126, very simple bill, just allowing GPS navigation systems to be on windshields. I think increasingly numbers of people aren't even using maps in their cars. They're dependent on these things. I think it'd be a good common sense bill.
Mr. Golick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under modified structured House Bill 190, right now, rideshare companies, Uber, Lyft, et cetera, they're called transportation network companies, or TNCs, in this bill, House Bill 190. There's no requirement right now under Georgia law for them to carry insurance whatsoever. There is no requirement whatsoever for them to carry insurance. House Bill 190 sets reasonable coverage requirements for these companies to carry insurance and has the support of the insurance department. There's no new fees or taxes or anything like that.
Any questions, Mr. Golick? Ms. Smith.
No questions for Mr. Golick. Next bill.
Have you got a bill that you want?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name by open rule, first bill, House Bill 82, by Representative Kidd.
Okay. You're going to have an extremely busy day today. We have a possibility of 18 bills on the calendar, 10 that we set Thursday for today, plus you've got 8 that are left over from Thursday, and then the speaker did that in an effort to make sure you got home safe and sound. So this is for Tuesday's calendar. Under open rule, HB 82. Any opposition? It's on. Under modified open, HB 147. Any opposition? It's on. Under modified open, HB 252. Any opposition? It's on. Modified open, HB 315. Any opposition? It's on. Under modified structure, HB 183. Any opposition? Under modified structure, HB 190. Any opposition? It's on. Modified structure, HB 195. Any opposition? That's it.